The security or certainty of how the other person feels about you. This should be a minimum qualifying factor. And by that I mean, if the other person isn't interested in you, it should disqualify you from pursuing any further relationship with them. Now, there are times in a relationship, the first couple dates, first couple weeks or months, in which you're trying to feel each other out, determine if you know this person, what you like and don't like about this person. But pretty early on, you should know that the person's interested in you. And when that stops, if it's at the beginning and you haven't defined the relationship and you're insecure about whether they're really interested or they care about your relationship, that should disqualify. If at any point that becomes less than certain, that should disqualify that person. And sometimes people get into relationships and they think, well, this person's really hot, or this person's really smart, the sex is great, they're funny, or they got a lot of money and they got a lot of good job. I think they would be a good mom or dad, come from a great family. There's so many factors that can go into evaluating a potential mate or partner or boyfriend or girlfriend. But if you're insecure or you're not certain about how they feel about you, that should always be enough to cut and run. There was a great hip hop artist, or rapper I should say, so I don't sound like old, that has some lyrics, has a line in one of his old songs, and that line is, "I don't chase them, I replace them." And that should be everyone's mantra when they're trying to evaluate a person for a long-term relationship. That's video number 1. Stay tuned. It's a German folklore, the Brothers Grimm, the Frog Prince. And the original Frog Prince is a little bit different than the modern one. But in the modern one, a princess, a spoiled princess, befriends a frog. She kisses him and he turns into a prince. There are innumerable things you can derive from this story. But in this video, I'd like to point out the difference in the result for the person who shows up as the frog and the person who shows up as the prince. I'm mainly talking to guys here. If you want to get laid or find someone who will be magically attracted to you, perhaps in the short term, for perhaps a short amount of time, you can act like the prince. You can dress yourself up, hide your insecurities, and just put on a good face. And this is what I recommend you do at the beginning of any relationship. However, if you want to find true love, it should be your priority to verify the safety of the person you're seeing and show up as the frog as soon as possible. This may sound counterintuitive, and it certainly goes against the grain of a lot of the pickup artist methods, of which I have been way too into at points in my life. But showing up as a frog is the quickest way to figure out and to ultimately find true love. So that is my advice. Take all this negging pickup artist tactics, not calling people back and playing games, and rest assured that will maybe get you laid. That may attract a person that thinks they're incomplete and they need something, validation from you, but it won't get you any closer to finding a real relationship. And for most of us, that's what we really want. More insight about dating relationships based on my own personal experience after 38 years as a single guy on this planet. I've had girlfriends before, I've just never been married. When you're on the receiving end of a breakup or someone else moving on, it's really easy to want to dull the pain of it. We can do this by creating a full schedule for ourselves, doing fun things that have short-term, perhaps enjoyment, but maybe no long-term benefits. We could go out and try to find a replacement really quickly. We could go out and try to get laid and think that that is the thing that's gonna make us stop being sad about the person that moved on. When in actuality, the best thing we can do for ourselves is to look inward, actually admit to ourselves the things that the breakup or the moving on has illuminated, and begin to rigorously start to work on those things. None of us are perfect people, and we enter relationships as imperfect people, and sometimes those relationships end to illuminate things that we need to work on, or to illuminate our imperfections. So instead of taking your position that you got hurt and the other person wronged you, which you will do as a human being, perhaps a more helpful strategy is to take what you learned from the breakup and begin to work on it. And if you need to go make yourself feel better while you're doing that, well, that's okay. But it's really hard to live with moving on from somebody and thinking you're never going to have it that good again. And the only way to ensure that that doesn't happen is to do the work on yourself that you learned from getting broken up with, or having someone else move on from you. If you got broken up with, or somebody decided they didn't want to date you anymore, there's this almost misunderstanding that the goal should be that eventually you should feel positive about that person. Eventually you will let the absence make you grow fonder of them, and you can remember the good times. And that is somehow a positive thing to aim for when you're going through the stages of trying to get over that person. I say don't do that. I say keep a running list of all the things that you actually didn't like about the person, so that you can be reminded every time you try to idealize them, or every time you grow fond of them in their absence. You can come back to reality and realize that they weren't perfect, and they're not a perfect person that you're making them out to be. So that one day, not only can you feel positive about the situation, like the first strategy I referenced, but you can also go forward and know that there were things that you didn't like about the person, and you can keep those in mind all the way until it doesn't bother you anymore, until it becomes a total non-issue for you, just like all the positive things. There's a really good TED Talk, which I'll leave if there's space, I'll leave reference to in the description. But I found that this is almost a hidden piece of advice out there amongst all of the advice, of which there is so much now about getting over somebody. Remember that they weren't perfect. There were things that you didn't like. When you had the upper hand in the relationship, or when you felt like they weren't going anywhere, there were things you picked up on that bothered you about them. Continue to pick up on those when you're done with the relationship, or you're grieving the loss, or feeling like, hey, maybe this person was right for me and I need to go back to them. Consider all the things you didn't like.